real estate, if you're a real estate broker, the interesting thing about real estate brokers, and I've often wanted to write about them because it's actually an incredibly interesting profession. The thing that people say they want in a house is never what they actually want. So the really great brokers are the ones who listen to what you say you want and then figure out the difference between that and your true desire.
That, of course, was the famous social scientist Malcolm Gladwell talking in an interview in the CBC with Eleanor Wachtel many years ago. Malcolm is correct for one part of what realtors do. That's representing the buyers. And yes, he's right. Most good realtors can identify before the client what it is they're going to be buying, but we can, of course, tell them because they have to find that out on their own, in their own time. My name is Duncan Fremlin. I'm a broker with Remax Hallmark, and this is number 13 in a series of videos that I've produced since COVID began. And this will be a little bit longer, this one. I'm celebrating my 35th year in the business, so I thought I'd just take a couple of minutes longer, maybe even more than that, just to describe a sale that I was part of last year that really defines what it is that I do for a living. People are constantly asking me. It's as Malcolm said, it's an industry or a profession that garners a lot of interest. There have been thousands of people come through my office door as agents. They last a week or a month or a year, and then they move on to something else. So a lot of people try to become realtors, and some are successful, some aren't. So I know there's a lot of interest. So this is I'll just take you through quickly a sale that had all sorts of obstacles. I had to do all sorts of things. Pretty much all of the skills that I've learned in my 35 years, I had to use to make this deal come close. The first thing that was of concern was the person who called me wasn't the owner of the house. It was a neighbor of the executor. It was an estate sale, obviously. So the first thing I had to do is find out who were the decision makers in this. I show up and find out that they aren't ready to sell the house. All they want is an appraisal for the probate in order to get probate, which I was happy to do. So it was an estate sale. There was one executor, but two people on title. The two people on title, it was tenants in common, which means each portion of the title could be considered a separate contract in and of itself, which meant that I needed complete cooperation from both owners in order to make this deal proceed. And as it turns out, I found out when I arrived at the house that the executor, who lived across the street, and the other owner, they weren't even speaking. They didn't like each other. In fact, the other owner was not allowed on the property itself. So, alarm bell number 2. I get there, find out the house is it's a downtown house, very old, had been renovated 25 years before, but the deceased had been dead for a year. Nothing had been done, as he had brought in tenants, single men, older single men. He rented rooms to them for $500 a month or thereabouts to help him pay the bills. They were still on the property. So they had been living there unsupervised for a year, so the house smelled and it was very dirty. Also found out that the tenants didn't know who I was or what I was doing there. I had to inspect the house. That was an alarm bell. I was told just to tell them I was a banker or something. The house itself structurally was okay, but it was old, full of stuff, just absolutely full of stuff. So I thought, how are we going to get rid of all that? It wasn't exactly on a prime street. It was a pretty good street, but not a prime street. So couldn't do much about that, but it would have to be marketed appropriately. But they didn't. It wasn't going to be. The point was that it wasn't going to be ready to be sold anytime soon. There had to be a lot of things done before they could get ready. So I sent them the appraisal. And every once in a while for the next year, I called, just check and see how they were doing, etc. Finally, I got a call a year later from the executor asking me if I would be their agent, which usually I would say, yeah, I'd be happy to be your agent, but this was going to be a tough one. And I really honestly wasn't sure whether I really wanted to take it on because I wasn't even sure it was going to close. This could have, a house with these circumstances, that listing could have gone on for a number of years. If we couldn't get cooperation from all the parties involved, including the tenants, I didn't know what was going to happen. But so yes, I came and I met with her. I met the agent or the tenants. One of them was unvaccinated. This was a few months ago, so the vaccination. Everybody else had been vaccinated, but that one tenant was not vaccinated. So I had to deal with that. He was also the one that was hostile, very suspicious of me. I explained to them that the situation, that they might have to leave, they might not have to leave. It depended on who was going to be buying the house. I spoke to the lawyer for the estate, and we both agreed that the house would be sold as is. Whoever was going to buy it would have to assume the tenants. Nobody had the wherewithal in our group, the owners or the lawyer, to get vacant possession. So whatever condition the house was in, whoever was living there, whatever the situation, whoever was going to buy it was going to have to buy it in that condition. Another alarm bell, that right there. So I was introduced to the other owner, was told that she's a problem. I may not be able to get a hold of her. They knew where she lived, but she didn't have email. She didn't have. She wasn't answering a phone. Nobody knew her phone number, even if she did have a phone. So they put a letter under her door. She eventually called. I got a hold of her. She turned out to be not the ogre that I thought she was going to be. We ended up meeting. I got her signature on the listing agreement. Found out from her landlord that she does have, she had some health issues and personality disorder, which meant that she was often difficult to contact. I couldn't be sure that I was going to contact her. It proved to be a problem many times throughout the course of the listing, mostly because we needed amendments signed, we needed this signed, that signed. If I couldn't get a hold of her, quite often the amendments expired. So whoever was going to buy this was going to have to be very patient. So my first order of the day, when I put it on the market, listed it, I made sure that every agent, every buyer that walked through it, everybody knew exactly the situation. We drafted a clause to put it in the offer so that everybody could read clearly what it is they were getting into. The COVID certainly didn't help it, but it didn't interfere, as it turns out. We ended up, and one other thing, there was a reverse mortgage on the property for a sizable amount of money. It was in arrears. They had borrowed a couple of $100,000 a few years before to do the renovations, and over a period of time it had built to over $600,000. So those of you who are thinking of reverse mortgages, think very clearly, think very long and hard as to whether you really want to do that. The other owner also said she didn't. Well, I went to get her signed up. I wanted some ID. She didn't have any ID. She said she lost her ID. In this day and age, with FinTrack, the money tracking operation in the government, we were going to have to figure this out. So that was another. These are all huge issues that took many hours and in some cases weeks to solve. We had many showings. 50, I think, maybe over 50. I had a lot of calls. It was on the market for 5 days. We held off on offers, said offer date on a certain particular day. We had 5 offers. They all had to be unconditional. They all had to have that clause that I asked for. And wouldn't you know it, a day before we were going to look at offers, a car ran into the house. It's on a laneway. It's been there 120 years, maybe 130 years, this house. Never had a car driven into the house until the day before we're looking at offers. So again, I get on the phone. I have to notify everybody who has shown interest in the house, including, especially, the 5 agents who registered offers on the property. As it turns out, one of the offers withdrew because of that. We had to bring in an engineer quickly to have a look to see if there was any problem. It wasn't definitive. It wasn't considered totally safe, but its indications were it wasn't a major issue. There were some cracks inside as well, but turns out 4 offers came through. Two of them were fairly close, and I was a little concerned because one of the offers was from an agent who didn't have an email, didn't have a cell phone, didn't know digital signatures, was hard to reach. I thought, oh, that could be a nightmare if he or she wins that deal. And between the acceptance of the offer and the closing, which could go on for 3, 4, 5 months, which it ended up doing, how was I going to be able to get a hold of this person to do amendments and waivers and all the other things that go with making a house firm? But he didn't win that offer. It was a young agent who was probably the most professional of all of them. And if it wasn't for this particular person, I'm certain this deal would not have closed. She worked very hard to prepare her buyers, and the buyers, two very skilled and smart and patient people, also came to the table and understood the situation, understood the needs of the tenants, helped a great deal, paid money directly to the tenants to help them relocate, which they ended up doing. Everyone just sort of chipped in. It was a team effort. The lawyer was very good. And then a month and a half before closing, what did they find? They found bed bugs and, cockroaches like you wouldn't believe. And I've seen houses with lots of cockroaches, but this one takes the cake. But it had bed bugs. And, of course, the Department of Health got involved. The counselor got involved. The counselor's office got involved. There was a community center nearby that helped the tenants find accommodation, and then the tenant that was causing me the problem at the beginning ended up having some kind of issue, and he attacked one of the other agents. The police were called in. He was taken away, spent quite a bit of time in jail over this. All of this was before the closing. So the house had sold. We had a firm offer on the table, and we had months before the closing, and everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. But everybody came to the table. We were patient. We did one step at a time. We made sure that everybody was listened to. All the needs were met. A lot of amendments were drafted. We had to add a new name to the contract, and that expired because I couldn't get hold of one of the... It turns out the two owners had been living in city properties. They were the heirs. They had a bit of a windfall, a very happy ending. They ended up, at the end of the day, reconnecting because they had been buddies in a previous life, and they're pals again. They're hanging out, smoking joints and watching TV and just having, hopefully, a great time. This has been a few months now. Wow, what a sale this was. And it took me 35 years to get a sale like that. But if I had this sale year 3 or 4 when I was just kind of green, I don't know if I would have been able to do this. It really called on every skill that I've learned in my years doing this to enable me to deal with all of this. And I'm happy to report that all of the tenants are relocated, and even the troubled guy is living in a special home. They had to move him to a different city where there was a special home to help him deal with his issues. So the counselor, the social worker, City Hall, everybody came to the table, and it had a happy ending. So if you're one of these people that are thinking about getting into real estate, it's a fantastic profession. Highly recommend it, but it won't be boring. I guarantee you that. So Duncan Fremlin, broker, RE/MAX Hallmark. I know this was kind of wordy, but 35 years, I thought I was allowed a long video, so maybe when I hit 70 years, I'll make an even longer one. Maybe not. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.